Good morning, everyone. It's bright and early, and I'm here with rebels from Extinction Rebellion from Surrey, Sussex, Brighton and Hove, across the southeast. We're here blocking Farnborough Airport. Three gates of the airport, in fact. We'll just give you a really quick show of what's going on at all of those gates. We've got rebels on tripods. We've got people locked to oil barrels. And here at the gate that I'm standing on, we have a limo blocking this gate, complete with a chauffeur and an Extinction Rebellion insignia on the front of the limousine. We're here today because we're calling out Farnborough Airport, and we're calling out private flights. Private flights cost the earth. They're on average 10 times more carbon intensive than standard aviation, and they're up to 50 times more carbon intensive form of travel than taking a train. So they're extremely polluting, and just a tiny proportion of people are taking these flights, but causing a disproportionate amount of environmental damage. So that's why we're here today, blocking Farnborough Airport. And yes, we'll be talking throughout this live stream to the rebels at the three gates. We'll find out about why they're doing it. We've also got, as you can probably see behind me, a former pilot who's joined us today, also from the southeast, and we'll be talking to him about what he used to do in the industry and why he's changed over his whole life, actually, why he's decided to support Extinction Rebellion and campaign for lowering the pollution caused by aviation. So I'm going to switch around my camera so that we can get a little bit closer up to the action and see what exactly we're doing here at Farnborough Airport today. For those of you who don't know Farnborough, it's the UK's premier private airport. There are many, especially in the southeast around London, but this is the biggest, and it's 30,000 flights come out of here per year, with permission to expand up to 50,000. Let's just take a quick look at a map of exactly where Farnborough is, if you're not entirely sure. So you just saw some aerial shots of Farnborough Airport, also some upside down, always fun on a live stream, first thing in the morning. So we are, not very far south of London, and I'm just going to try and show you some shots of the airport through the gates here. I'm currently on a side gate, and members of Extinction Rebellion have put up some banners for people driving past in Farnborough and Aldershot to see. So the message is private flights cost the earth. And often we talk about our three demands. Today, really, we only have one demand, and that is for the government to ban private flights. It would be an easy thing to do. Very, very few people take them compared to the amount of damage that they cause. In fact, there's 1% of the super rich in the world. That's all people all over the world. 1% cause 50% of the aviation emissions. So we're not going after people who have to fly for their to see members of their family. Today, members of the public who have to fly. Although, of course, we'd like to see aviation wound down in general, especially for leisure. But this action is specifically about private flights, which, to be honest, in the pandemic have skyrocketed. We could possibly see a few headlines that I picked out from news publications now. We've got about 4 or 5 of them. And it's well known that through the pandemic, and just another one came out the other day actually about the incredible uptick in private flights for people who are basically trying to evade the quarantines and evade the lockdowns, and have decided that this is the new way to travel, so they don't have to mix with the great unwashed, such as ourselves, and in the process, like I said, causing irreparable damage to the climate, which is going to be felt by people, especially living, I mean, people all over. We usually say people in the global south are going to feel the greatest effects of climate change, and that is definitely the case. But we've been feeling this year, we've been seeing it much, much closer to home. We've been seeing flooding, terrible flooding in Germany, killing hundreds of people. We've seen floods going down really scary into the tube in London, and similar things happening in China. People, whole tube trains having water coming up pretty much almost to their chests or necks. Hurricanes throughout the eastern part of the United States and the western part of the United States, wildfires, all of this being caused by climate change. It would be such an easy win to ban private flights. So why isn't the government doing that? That's what we're calling for today. I'd like to the viewer to maybe make up their minds about why the government isn't doing that. I have my own ideas, and I'm sure Todd does as well. Hi. Hi, Todd. How are you feeling this morning? It's an early one.
It's a little bit early, a little bit cold. It's a strange feeling, you know, being outside an airport. You know, in my uniform, I'm used to kind of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, putting the uniform on, the sun's rising, and you know, going to work. So unfortunately, that's not reality for me anymore. You know, once I fully understood, you know, the reality of the situation that we're in, you know, I felt absolutely compelled to do something about it. So, you know, hence why I'm here now with Extinction Rebellion, and I've decided I can no longer be a part of that polluting sector, but you know, I think it's important to have voices from carbon-heavy industries represented, and you know, highlight you know, the sheer injustice of aviation and the false solutions being proposed, because many of the airline employees have no idea about the real impact, because of these powerful lobbies which have created their own websites and you know, trying to deceive the public and the employees as well. And ultimately, there's going to be a much bigger crash of the job market if the industry is allowed to expand. So yeah, that's about it. That's about me, why I'm here. And you know, I think with private flights, you know, as you said already, the UK Climate Assembly in 2019, it was 9 parliamentary select committees put together this, you know, supposedly democratic process. It was non-binding, but you know, one of their key recommendations was banning polluting private flights. And you know, it's just so simple, as you say. When it is ultimately the pinnacle of injustice, you know, these flights are completely unnecessary. We're just 22 miles from Heathrow, and we've recently seen a spike as well in the amount of traffic being taken by private flights as we're coming out of lockdown restrictions. And of course, the private sector was hardly even really impacted during COVID. Many people were, you know, if they could afford to, they were jumping on these aircraft and going off on their secret holidays, whilst the rest of us were locked down and, you know, doing our part. So yeah, you know, it's as you said, the 1% of the population create 50% of the demand, and you know, we need to. The other thing is as well, not only are the government ignoring the UK Climate Assembly's recommendations, but they're actually further incentivising the use of you know, incentivising the super rich through tax-free kerosene. There's absolutely zero tax on kerosene, so the people that benefit most from this are the wealthiest families that can jump on board these aircraft and fly regularly. I mean, flying is unfortunately the most energy intensive activity per hour a human can embark on, and what we're seeing here at Farnborough, we're seeing this narrative around so-called sustainable aviation fuel, and it's essentially a term which has been coined by Shell Aviation, among others, and it's just another delaying tactic for them to carry on with business as usual. The reality is, even if they was able to roll out this so-called SAF, which is a combination of many different fuels, but even if they rolled it out to the best of their ability by 2030, you're still looking at less, around about a 5% maximum blend across the whole of the airline sector. So, private jet operators and owners have the money, to do what they like. So they should be ensuring that they're protecting the planet in the choices that they make. And we absolutely need that systemic change from government. If we had a government taking this emergency seriously, then clearly this would be one of the first things that would go. But obviously it benefits the super rich and most likely many of their friends. So.
I was going to say, actually, because I was just, before I came to you, I was just talking to the viewers about, why hasn't this been taken down already as an industry that serves so few people? And you could easily get rid of it and make a really big, a substantial dent in our carbon, taking down our carbon emissions relative to the amount of people inconvenienced. So if they haven't done that already, you've got to wonder, haven't you? Is it because of, like you said, the super rich are actually involved in a lot of what the government is, they're the government's friends. We've seen a lot. I'm going to bring in a little bit about COVID. Lots of contracts have gone to COVID contracts have gone to people who are linked to the government, for example. So it starts to you get into this murky underworld, don't you? And there's also an arms fair which is coming up here in a few days' time, and a lot of that's sort of a private jets crossover into military buying on the part of the government and civil authorities. So it is really a very murky world. I know that you wanted to say something about you have a little bit of experience of what goes on in the sort of the private flight sector, not through your own experience as a pilot, but sort of some of your professional experience. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. So once I had my medical revoked, I used to fly for Thomas Cook, and after I had my medical revoked, I realised the impacts of climate change. I hypocritically, saw the effects of mass tourism and climate change firsthand. And once I fully made the decision that I could no longer return to the sector, during the period that I was off, I was actually doing a lot of simulator work. So as pilots, every 6 months, we need to go into the simulator to ensure our skills are maintained. And one of the companies I was contracting for at that time, they were a VVIP airline operator. And they not only had these small private jets, but they actually had the full-size, Airbus A320, even an A340, which is what you go on holiday as a long-haul customer. These huge aircraft, completely empty with a few people on, and furthermore, they were contracting for. I remember one instance of some African state leaders. I don't know if it was a president of, I won't say which country, but they would hire this private jet to fly from an African state over to Florence in Italy to have their tailor-made suits, done. And when I realised that, I thought, even though I'm not even flying, I'm just on the ground in a simulator. I just thought I can't be involved in this anymore. It's just complete injustice and contradictions.
That is craziness, isn't it? When you see people like Farnborough Airport, I'm just going to actually put myself in it. Oh no, sorry. When you see, like people from Farnborough Airport talking about sustainable aviation fuel, and then you have exactly what you talked about, where you can see that planes are going half empty or more than half empty, or you've got like 2.5 passengers per private flight, I think is the figure that we're quoting today, right?
Yeah, which is the equivalent of 9 UK citizens' annual carbon equivalent, CO2 equivalent.
So when they start talking about sustainable aviation fuel, we're actually going to watch a video in a minute to sort of talk about, why that's a bad idea, because we could go on about that for hours, couldn't we? Not totally the message today, but you can just see that it's greenwash, isn't it? Because there's, the amount of fuel that they're using, it just doesn't compute with being sustainable in any form, whatever it's made of.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's the speed at which aircraft travel. You know, the energy required, and just you know, obviously the if you was gonna fly, obviously the most efficient way would be, you know, complete economy. You know, as many seats as possible on board the biggest type of aircraft. You know, with two engines. But obviously, yeah, these are the complete opposite end of the spectrum and just benefit the elite. So yeah.
And yeah, in Extinction Rebellion, we're all about climate justice, aren't we? I think that's a really it's a really good way of. A lot of people find it quite difficult to get their head around the idea of climate justice. I think this action today, hopefully, we're going to kind of bring it across because it's like the pinnacle of climate injustice. So few people causing such disproportionate is what I'm looking for, disproportionate damage, which is going to affect everyone in the world, especially those like 75%, I think it is that right? 75% of people have never been on a plane in the world?
Yeah, unfortunately it's even more than that. It's over 80%, I think about 83% of people have never even stepped foot on an aircraft. So, you know, if you can imagine of the remaining 20 or so percent of people that have flown, just an absolute minority of people that, I've never even been on a private jet, you know. So the percentage of those people and the amount of emissions that Bill Gates, you know, his annual CO2 emissions, I think it's like 2,500 tons per year or something. It's just like absolutely ridiculous. Elon Musk is another prime example. You know, he seems to, you know, say at a surface level he cares about the planet and he's trying to do all that he can, but then he uses private jet to commute from LA up to San Francisco, you know, and just if you can track his flight, it's on YouTube. It's just absurd. So yeah, it's just do as I say, but not as I do.
And let's not let Boris Johnson off the hook either, because he famously took a private jet down to Cornwall for the G7, right? So we're going at the government today to say, really, you know, clean up your act. First of all, you know, don't take these things yourselves. Ban them for people who are taking them, because it's totally unnecessary. And we're also just trying. There is an outreach table over at one of the other gates, which we will go over to in a minute and talk to them. But yeah, we're trying to say, just kind of show people who take these things that it's about fairness, isn't it? I think perhaps people don't sort of really think of that other side of it, but what are your actions causing to other people in the world?
No, absolutely. And of those over the 80% of people that have never flown, of course, they're the people that are most disproportionately affected by the effects of the climate and ecological emergency right now. You know, we're seeing areas of the world becoming destabilized. You know, food scarcity, water shortages, diseases are increasing, and you know, there's up to 1.2 billion climate refugees forecast in less than 30 years' time by 2050. You know, if we hit 3 or 4 degrees by the end of the century or sooner, then, you know, vast parts of the planet will be uninhabitable. You know, most of Africa, Spain's going to look like a desert. And you know, this image of, you know, this private lifestyle, this private jet lifestyle to go and, you know, travel and see the world. Just at 2050, if we hit 2 degrees of warming, 99% of the coral reef's going to die. You know, it's just flying abroad to witness the collapse of ecosystems. And, you know, people need to get real about the situation we're in. And yeah.
You can't fly away from it forever, right? It's going to catch up with us. Those climate refugees, they're going to be on our shores. We're already seeing the beginning of that, of course. And the impacts are going to be here soon as well. So it's the same kind of thing as when people were building nuclear bunkers with their money in the Cold War, I suppose. But anyway, I think thank you so much, Todd, for your testimony and your expertise on this. And we'll probably come back to you in a bit, but I'm going to sort of pass the mic, I think, over to some of the other gates now to see what's going on there, as well as just take a brief look at our rebels. It's actually quite cold here, so we're kind of covering people up, making sure that they're well. Yeah. So let's pass over to one of the other gates now and see what's happening there. And we'll join you again soon.
Yeah, this is one of the three gates. This is one of the 3 gates that we're blocking this morning. It's a really cold morning and there's rain expected. So we've got some rebels here attached to barrels blocking the entrance. They've also blocked the gate at the back. They shut it. And they're wrapped up in sleeping bags against the cold. So just give you a little view of where we are. Good grief. So it looks like you're all set for spending some time here today protesting. Can you give me tell me why you're here today? Why it's so important to you to make this point about private jets?
Sure. I suppose what I feel that in the last 2 or 3 years, it has become clear to everyone that we are in an emergency. We are in code red. And I'm conscious of the fact that the changes that are necessary to ensure a future that is livable for ourselves and our children and grandchildren require massive changes. And I acknowledge the difficulties, the complexities. What I don't understand, why we are not doing and planning immediately, the low-hanging fruits, the solutions which are obvious. And this is one of the obvious solutions. Private jets make a huge contribution to carbon emission. So why is the problem not being tackled? They are used by only a very small elite. They cause 50 more times pollution than trains, and they are easily substitutable with something else. If people are desperate to fly, if they are really desperate to fly, they can fly on commercial airlines. So this is the place to start. Not many people would suffer if they are, at least they have taxes imposed on aviation fuel and on tickets, and possibly to completely ban private jets. It just seems such an easy part of the solution, if not the entire solution.
And it seems to me that, yes, indeed, and it seems to me that it's the companies themselves who are being led by the consumer. They're not taking the tough decisions and showing leadership, are they? It's the fact that people show an increased desire to want to get away in this way, and they're going to expand the amount of airplanes continually that is needed to fuel this. So,
and it's one of the very few sectors of the economy that has been, and aviation in particular, that has been growing during COVID. So obviously there are benefits from all sides, but they're not benefit people in any way except a small elite. So it just seems such an obvious way to start taking this problem seriously.
So what would you say to the government then that they should do immediately?
That they should ban private jets and certainly impose taxation on aviation fuel and tickets more broadly.
Yes,
that's the
yes,
start.
Indeed. We do need a carbon tax for sure.
Totally.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your thoughts this morning. I hope you're not going to be too cold or wet. Yes, indeed. I think we perhaps have a testimony that we've pre-recorded from one of our rebels here that we could play at this point, because some of them look a little bit reluctant to talk. They're settling in for a long period today of blocking the road.
Hello, my name is John. I live in Brighton with my wife and 2 young children. The impact that the climate crisis is going to have within their lifetimes is terrifying. Our children's generation is going to ask us, when there was still time to prevent the worst of the global heating impact, what were you doing? This is a question that haunts me, and it's why I'm protesting at Farnborough Airport today as part of Extinction Rebellion. There is no way we're going to prevent a catastrophic climate crisis without changing the aviation industry. A return transatlantic flight generates more carbon emissions than the average European person generates by heating their home for an entire year. For private aircraft, the situation is even worse, as they are 10 times more carbon intensive than an airliner. Private aviation also highlights the vast inequalities in the current situation, where super high-income people can carry on generating vast amounts of carbon emissions, while the rest of us, and particularly people in low-income areas of the world, are left with the social and environmental costs of these emissions. This is why we're here today at Farnborough Airport to demand that the government bans all private flights.
Well, there's been an airport or an airfield at Farnborough for over 100 years. And it's a really important part of Farnborough's history, you know, the First World War, Second World War. It's a place where carbon fibre was invented, lots of research on Concorde. Everyone who lives in Farnborough has a connection to the Royal Aircraft establishment. So these protesters aren't protesting against the airfield, they're protesting against the airport, which is a much more problematic thing. The airport was created quite recently, within the last 20 or 30 years, when climate change was well understood, and it was well understood that humans were causing it. But it becomes even more problematic because a couple of years ago, the people who created the airport sold it off to a company called Macquarie. And Macquarie, I think, is the type of business that buys infrastructure in return for long-term dividends. Well, when Macquarie bought it, there was a full-time climate emergency, which makes it much more problematic. Sometimes you hear about issues such as greenwash and companies not taking it seriously. The local groups in Farnborough, the local XR group, Friends of the Earth, another local group that's complaining about noise created at their houses, has formed sort of a coalition, and they meet with, as part of a consultative committee with the airport. The airport had to set up this consultative committee as part of its planning permission. Once every 4 months, they meet together with locally elected members from councils in the local area. And one of the questions that the coalition asked, the environmental coalition asked, was, does the committee accept we need to halve carbon emissions within the next 10 years? Well, for someone in XR, this is just bread and butter, isn't it? You know, everyone knows it. But the representatives from the airfield, they seemed quite surprised. They thought this is some mad radical idea. And they said, we do not accept this at all. You know, so they didn't even understand the most basic principles about how serious the climate emergency is. So 4 months later, they came back and they didn't say, all right, you're right, we agree. We have to halve our carbon emissions within the next 10 years. But they asked if they could read a prepared statement. And they said, we accept the climate emergency is very serious. And, you know, they accepted it was very serious. And they said, they went on to list all of the things, the additional things they were going to do. Already on their website, they have a whole page about how environmentally friendly they are. You know, they're fully compliant with all the ISO standards. They won awards for their environmentally friendly buildings. But the trouble is, it's a bit like Royal Dutch Shell. No matter that they sell each year, the airport sells every year £30 million of aviation fuel, of an annual turnover, about £74 million in 2019. Never mind they sell all this fuel, because they're not burning it themselves, they don't have to take responsibility for it. You know, they say it's the fault of the people who fly the airplanes from their airport. So they came back and they listed all the additional things they were going to do, because one rebel asked the question, do you accept that we need to halve our carbon emissions within the next 10 years? So they're going to, for example, replace all of their vehicles with electric vehicles. I know I've seen on the stream people have mentioned SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel, already. The trouble is, you know, they're hard. I'm sure the people at the airport are hard-working, decent, intelligent people. But if your business involves aviation fuel, you know, private jets, it's just impossible. Okay, it's just impossible to run a business that's compliant with the survival of our global economy, our society, and our civilization. So that's all I've got to say about it at the moment. I think now we're going to go across to another pre-recorded video from a rebel who would like to explain why they're doing this today.
I am taking action because we've run out of options and are heading for disaster. How do we solve the climate crisis whilst the elite feel they can continue on as usual, flying around the world and using up the same amount of CO2 as 9 UK citizens would use in a year? In an emergency situation, you take the emergency response. The radical action we need will not come from signing petitions or writing to our MPs. We've tried that. It is too late for that. It will come from non-violent direct action and taking to the streets. Our government is complicit in millions of deaths due to their failure to act on the climate and ecological emergency. I recognise that our house is on fire, and what I have to do is pull the alarm and guide people to safety, because our leaders won't.
So we're back at the side gate now. Just to recap, if anybody's connecting, early in the morning when you're waking up. We've been here since 6:30. This is Extinction Rebellion, rebels from the southeast. It's a regional action at Farnborough Airport. We are blocking 3 out of, I believe there's maybe one more gate that we haven't blocked. I think it's 3 out of 4 gates at this, the UK's premier private airport. 30,000 private flights go out of here per year, and in fact Farnborough has permission to expand this to being 50,000. And a lot of people will know already that private flying has increased incredibly during COVID, as people who are maybe not quite as rich as the people who used to take private flights have figured out that actually this is a way that they can get around quarantines and lockdowns. And you can even you can like flight share, I suppose is the word, like you can buy up seats in a private jet to get a more exclusive experience than if you were buying first class perhaps on a commercial passenger airline. So we're here to say private flights cost the earth. They're hugely polluting, 10 times more polluting. In fact, depending on your figures, I've seen 20 or even 40 times more polluting than your regular aviation. But we're going to say 10 to be conservative. But even that is just craziness, when really these are unnecessary things to do, and certainly totally inappropriate in a climate emergency. We need to be stopping investing in these places, or allowing them to flourish by selling their 0% tax kerosene, which is the Farnborough Airport's biggest money earner, in fact, not the flights themselves. And we need to, the government just needs to ban all private flights now. Use the money that they have, the very small amount of money that they're actually putting into their 10-point plan at the moment compared to COVID recovery or HS2 or other big projects. And they need to invest in sustainable transport for everybody. They need to be investing in insulating homes, in green jobs for the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those solutions a bit later. Just quick sort of roundup at this gate of what's going on. So yeah, we've got our banners, private flights cost the earth. And we have a limousine here. I'll see the driver in a minute. So attached to the limousine in classic XR style, we've got 2 people locked on to the wheel arch in order to firmly block this gate. And as you've seen, lock-ons at other 2 gates as well, and just so inspiring to hear from people who are locked on in the cold. My hands are turned to claws because it's really cold out here, but they're still able to have these really lucid and moving testimonies as to why they're doing this. And I'll see whether any of the rebels here would like to talk as well, just sort of readjusting some of their bedding now. But I thought before we do that, we're going to go to a clip from one of our sort of technical experts, Finlay Asher, who is the founder of Green Sky Thinking, and he has a lot of experience in aerospace engineering. So I'm going to say take it away, Finlay, for our video.
The first thing to understand about flying is that it's pretty much the fastest way to burn fossil fuels and produce greenhouse gas. For example, a return flight from Europe to New York generates roughly the same amount of emissions as the average European heating their home for an entire year. The next thing to understand is that it's relatively wealthy, high income, high emitting individuals and countries that fly the most. Yet it is the relatively low income, low emitting individuals and countries that bear the brunt of the health impacts and the climate impacts from aviation emissions, particularly in the global south, where people fly less. One of the key points introduced by the 2015 Paris Climate Change Agreement was the principles of equity and fairness when it comes to reducing emissions. That is, the higher income countries and individuals should take action much faster than the lower income countries and individuals. So in countries like the UK, where we have a very high per capita number of flights, if we are still expanding our airports, if we're still seeing more and more air traffic growth, then clearly we're breaking our commitments. Aviation is the pinnacle of climate injustice and emissions inequality. For example, only 1% of the global population produces over half of aviation emissions. 80% of the world have never actually stepped foot on an aircraft, and even in countries like the UK, it's a very small proportion, about 15% of the population, that produce 70% of the aviation emissions. And private aviation is the absolute peak of those injustices. For example, a private jet is about 10 times as carbon intensive as a normal airliner, and about 50 times as carbon intensive as travelling by train. And just a 4-hour flight in a private jet produces the same amount of emissions as the average person does in an entire year. This means we have a very small minority of very wealthy individuals with a carbon footprint that is far higher than the average person. For example, Bill Gates has a carbon footprint that is 3,500 times higher than the global average required for us to remain under 1.5 degrees of global warming.
Right, we're back at our side gate now with a limousine, and the limousine driver is back from a little break, and he's holding a sign which says "Justice for James Brown." Now, this isn't specifically part of the action, but James Brown is a Paralympian who was sentenced to a year in prison just last week for getting on top of an airliner at London City Airport. He held it up for, I believe, about an hour, and that was in 2019. So it's taken a long time to get through the course, but he's been imprisoned. He's now, I believe, in Wandsworth Prison, and he's going to have to serve at least 6 months of that sentence. And we are just devastated by that. In XR, obviously, we do the actions that we do knowing that we might face the punishment of the law as it stands. But there is a choice. Judges have a choice as to how they sentence, and we believe this is a really, really retrograde step in justice for a peaceful protest. So I might see in a minute whether I can talk to our cab driver. Our limousine driver, a little bit more about that and about his banner and what's motivated him to bring that to the attention of the live stream today. But we might go over to another gate in a minute. Oh, look, the lights have lit up. You might not be able to see it so well on the live stream, but so that is the runway, and clearly they're going to try and get some flights going today in spite of what we're doing. Now, we haven't actually, although we've blocked the vehicle entrances to the airport, we haven't stopped people getting in by foot if they want to park and come and use the airport. That looks like that's what's being planned. So yes, there's another interview being lined up at another gate. So we'll go back there, and then hopefully I'll be able to talk to our limo driver in just a few minutes.
Yeah, we've got rebels here being embalmed in survival bags because the conditions are really very raw this morning. And we've got a rebel here who's consented to talk to us. Good morning.
Hi there.
Yeah, can you just give us some idea of your motivation to be here today? What would you say to the not only Farnborough Airport but the government with regards to your demands, what they do about private jet flights?
Sure. So private jet flights at the moment, they're massive extravagance that is burning tons and tons of fuel, leading to loads of carbon emissions for the gain of very, very few and to the cost of very many. At the moment, jet fuel is untaxed. I saw a stat that was £30 million of fuel were burned from Farnborough, I think in 2019, which means a £47 million gift, tax-free, like of tax cut to the super rich that are flying on these really elite vehicles.
It seems bizarre, doesn't it, to have an increase. In fact, we know that the normal airports all around the country, each one of them has a plan to expand, and they're hoping to increase air travel by 50%, I think, by 2040. It's really scary.
Yeah, it's incompatible with the future that we're facing, and we really need to question what the aviation industry is doing, and look at kind of transitioning away and look at alternatives.
What do you think the role of the government is in this? Do you, as well as speaking to Farnborough Airport today, telling them how we feel about this, what role does the government have to play?
Well, I think the government has the ultimate power over these things, doesn't it? Assume it controls the aviation regulation body. It makes the rules, and everyone else pretty much has to play by them. So, yeah, they have the power to do things about this. Unfortunately, they don't seem particularly motivated to make any changes that affect, those super rich that are flying around and causing umpteen thousand times more emissions than a normal person.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much for your thoughts. I hope you can stay comfortable today.
Yeah, I'll try.
Thanks. Okay, we've got another person ready to speak at one of our other locations at the moment.
Ready? Please say you're ready.
Hey, yeah, ready?
So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us why you're on top of a tripod today?
Hi, yeah, my name is John. I'm here as part of Extinction Rebellion today at Farnborough Airport. We are protesting. Our wider concern is for a low carbon future for everyone, but particularly here today at Farnborough, highlighting the effects of the aviation industry. Using any sort of aeroplane is incredibly carbon intensive, and it's something we're going to have to address if we've got any hope of moving to a low carbon future. The private aircraft and private jets are even worse, they're up to 10 times more carbon intensive than a regular airliner. So it seems something we've got to address if we're going to move to a low carbon future. For me personally, a big motivation is I've got two young children. And I know one day that they and their generation are going to ask us what we were doing when there was still time to try and avert at least the worst of the climate crisis effects. So yeah, that's why I'm here personally and why we're here today at Farnborough.
What do your friends and family think about you doing things like this?
My family are very supportive. My wife's very supportive. Yeah, most people are supportive. Some people are very surprised. I'm absolutely not. I've never been involved in any sort of activism or direct action before. It's purely the size of the problem that has really sort of almost forced me to action. I can't sort of stand by really. So yeah, friends and family are surprised but supportive.
Have you got a message for people who work at the airport?
A good one. I think it's really. I really don't know what the answer could be for the aviation industry. I mean, there's lots of talk about electric aircraft, but they're going to be decades away. They won't be anywhere near ready enough to avert. They can't be part of a low carbon by 2050 or 2030, whatever time frame. And even they talk a lot about sustainable air fuels, sort of using biofuels. But also that is largely greenwash because there's nowhere near enough available crops or waste food or oil to create even a tiny percentage of the amount of airline fuel that they need. So I'm not sure. If I was working in the airline industry, personally, I'd be tempted to try and move to something different because I'm afraid. I personally don't see any easy options. I'm afraid.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so. I think if anyone watching is interested to get involved, they should certainly sign up to Extinction Rebellion. There's lots of things you can do. You don't have to sit on top of a scaffolding tripod in the cold. So yes, please join us. Please help.
Since you've got the microphone, you'll have to say, and now we hand over to somebody else.
Okay, and now handing over to someone else at the protest. Thank you.
Right, 2 minutes. We're back at Gulfstream Gate. So cool because there's a big building in the background there called Gulfstream. I can't remember exactly what they do, but yeah, we're still here, and you can see that we've got rebels with plastic sheeting to keep them slightly warm in for the long haul. We're going to stay here. Well, I think the plan is just to stay for as long as possible. So there's some rain forecast later. Not going to be very pleasant, but it's not about that. It's about commitment to our message, which is that, as you can see on the banner, private flights cost the earth. Just wanted to come back to Todd, our pilot, actually, to talk about what we could be doing with some of the money. So we want to kind of talk about solutions as well, as well as what the problem is. Go back this way again. Even though you know, we want to be, we're not really here to come up with solutions. We're a protest group, right? We want the government to be coming up with solutions, but we can try. So I think you and your colleagues that are sort of have experience in the aviation industry but are now trying to reform it have some ideas about what could be done, right?
Yeah.
As a starting point anyway. So you were going to say something about the fact that kerosene isn't taxed at all currently. So what could change there?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that because kerosene isn't taxed, it benefits the high income earners the most, because they're the ones that fly most, and typically people are from low income households that might save up their hard earned cash for that one flight every year or so. Is most likely going to be a short haul flight as well. So whereas more affluent families or private jet owners would go the extra mile. So aside from that, all of the alternative fuels that are being proposed, firstly, we've got this 10-point plan that's been invented by the government, and part of that is something called Jet Zero.
Yes.
And Jet Zero is essentially just this huge greenwashing scandal that, even if their proposal was entirely successful, just 4% of those flights would be zero emissions flights, which would be electric aircraft.
Hardly zero.
Yeah, exactly right. And that these electric aircraft, they can just they're such short range because the batteries are so heavy, and normally fuel when you fly, it gets burned, so the aircraft gets lighter and you can land safely and stuff like that. So we're not going to be able, there are no green alternatives to aviation, and what the industry is trying to do is push this so-called sustainable aviation fuel narrative, as you would have seen in Finley's video as well. And essentially, it's just at the moment it's just used cooking oil, and that's already being utilised fully. That feedstock's been utilised in ground transport. It's the least efficient way to use that type of fuel in an aircraft. And of course, the cost of that fuel, they use cooking oil, or they're using animal fats, or various different types of biofuels, which are definitely not sustainable. They're anywhere between 3 and 5 times the cost of kerosene currently. And then, if you start looking at hydrogen again, it's not sustainable. There's various different types of hydrogen. A lot of it just benefits the oil industry through using existing refineries, blue hydrogen, etc. But that's even more expensive, and we'd need to completely redesign aircraft, fuselage and stuff to hold that fuel,
Which is going to take some time, right? Meanwhile, we're hurtling more and more towards disaster. And if you use those biofuels, that's taking away from space where you can actually be, that's taking away from land space where you could be raising those crops for food, right?
Yeah.
So there's a problem with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and rewilding is absolutely essential right now.
Indeed, protecting nature.
Yeah, so
Not just about humans.
yeah, so because all of these alternative fuels that the government love talking about, the industry love talking about, as a way of getting business as usual back going, because they're so expensive, the airlines are not just going to take on these fuels, even if you did have it in excess and it was sustainable, which it isn't, and it's not available. It's just too expensive. So, what the UK Climate Assembly, as I've mentioned earlier, they recommended a tax on frequent flyer levy, and so that would help make it more just. But yeah, if we tax kerosene, that would, with the money that was raised, those billions raised could be ring fenced, and that money could be redirected to retrofitting housing stock in the UK or public transport, social care. It's such an easy way. There's currently a fossil fuel which is completely tax-free and only benefits the most wealthiest, and the polluting elite. So, it's very simple. And what we're doing in our worker-led movement is trying to highlight the fact that if the industry continues to expand at the rate that it's forecast, which is a doubling of traffic every 15 years, in 2019 we flew 4 billion passengers, and clearly there's less than 8 billion people on this earth. So if the industry doubled in size in 15 years, then we'd need to essentially double the workforce in the next 10 or 15 years, as we're witnessing the collapse of climate and ecosystems. So if that's allowed to happen, eventually the science, the policy will catch up with the science. And can you imagine all those extra workers coming into the sector, and then just and it falls off the cliff. But myself, I'm still in over £100,000 worth of flight training debt. It's so expensive to learn to fly, and there's no help from the government, no help in training, like a university loan or anything like that. So we absolutely need this just transition. And but in aviation it looks different to oil and gas, for instance, but it's about stopping the unrestrained growth and helping the industry generally decarbonise, which ultimately means less flying.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, I've turned the camera back around because my arm is aching. But yeah, I'm hoping that we can kind of see a bit of the runway and some planes as well, because there are planes taxiing. I thought I saw. Maybe not. I'm getting a bit disoriented. Yeah.
There is a jet.
So we haven't totally blocked things, but like I said earlier, that wasn't we want to allow people to come and go on foot, because we're not against the workers. That's what so many people want to say, is that we're let's see if I can give my arm a break. We're not against the workers at all. Like, we want, everybody's stuck in this toxic system, right? And we want to see, like you said, people given sustainable alternatives to an industry. If they have skills in that, we don't want them to just go down the toilet with the planet. We want everyone to be provided for. So,
and there's so many green jobs that could be created, if the government took this seriously. And this retrofitting of housing stock in the UK, or public transport, there's many opportunities to create green jobs, and in a sector like aviation, especially for highly skilled workers, there should be support, in my opinion, from the government to aid in retraining to go into low carbon sectors. Otherwise, people are just going to be left with these huge training fees and stuff. But yeah,
absolutely, yeah, solidarity with you, Todd, and like what you've done, because obviously it's taken a huge amount of like everything in your being, I'm sure, to like change your direction and to come and sort of speak with us. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us.
No worries, thank you. And can I just say a huge shout out to James Brown right now, who's in Wandsworth prison. If it wasn't for the courage and actions of people like James, when I saw his action at London City Airport in October 2019, there we go, just another billionaire off on their travels. When I saw that action in 2019, it was, it sent shockwaves through the sector, and it forced me to really question, what my priorities were in life, and to really look at the science. So. Huge solidarity to James right now, and others that will no doubt have to suffer and lose their freedoms. Trying to stay on the right side of history and doing what's right. So yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a big sort of, it's a sobering moment for the movement, really. Like you said, other people will have to stand in that place as well. But yeah, please do share the James Brown story. You can find, I think there's a video of it that was made for XR UK, so the channel that you're probably watching this on, if you want to share what's happened to him as a kind of, it's a warning shot to us campaigners, and we're going to keep doing this. But aviation is a particularly thorny issue, sensitive topic. Yes, so we just heard a jet take off. I guess I don't really know whether you can see this. There's another one just about to take off. With that in mind, so just to remind you, we're at Farnborough Airport in the southeast, not far south from London. It's sort of the Surrey Hampshire border area. Extinction Rebellion southeast have come and blocked 3 different gates here at Farnborough to stop vehicular traffic getting through. The private flights are still taking off, but our message is ban private flights now. They're of no good use to anyone. They're extremely polluting to the planet, disproportionately so, and it's increasing climate injustice. So the rich are being able to sort of pay their way out of being restricted from their travel due to COVID. Meanwhile, the emissions by those jets are contributing to ever more climate breakdown, which is being felt especially in the countries right now in the global south, or as some people call it, the majority world, where, like Todd said, 80% of people in the entire world have never taken a flight, so they're having to pay for private jets. So yeah, private jets are costing the earth. That's the message. Please share the live stream if you think what you've heard today is interesting, and you think more people need to hear that message. I'm going to pass over. Let's hear another testimonial video from Inez, I think, now, and then we might bring you a little bit more from Finley Asher in just a minute.
Hi, I'm taking part in this action at the airport today because I firmly believe that private jets are the fastest route to extinction. If I understand correctly, they are 10 times more carbon intensive than the normal commercial airplanes, and they are 50 times more polluting than trains. So we are now just over a month before COP, so it is the right time to make strong demands of the government to take drastic and long-lasting measures against private jets and private airports, starting with taxing aviation fuel and tickets for flights, and perhaps ending ending by banning entirely private jets. That's what I believe.
So glad to hear from Inez there, and she was locked on at another of the gates this morning and talked to another of our live streamers so eloquently about why she's here doing what she's doing. Some people who are here locked on are feeling quite uncomfortable and don't want to talk. That's fine. People who don't want to talk to the live stream often contribute or sort of make themselves known in other ways physically, and we're going to just watch a little clip of what happened first thing this morning to kick off this action at Farnborough Airport. So you can see a rebel there actually. You can see the rebel there actually cutting through the gate, through the fence, in a symbolic act of defiance against Farnborough Airport and the private flight industry. Private flights contributing 10 times more carbon to the atmosphere than standard passenger aviation, and 50 times more polluting than trains. So we're saying, and often, these are the super rich who are using these. Like we were talking to Todd earlier, who was saying that he's had first-hand experience of seeing how people often use these just for, it's pleasure trips, business trips sometimes as well, but with Zoom and all these teleconferencing technologies now, we should not need to be flying, let alone in these tiny private jets that are so polluting. It's making a big comeback now as COVID restrictions are easing, and it's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable in a climate emergency. So this is one of our brave Southeast rebels clipping, to be honest, quite a big chunk of the fence open first thing this morning to kick off this action. And actually going through into the airport itself. So that was Farnborough Airport. We're still here, maybe an hour and a half later, blocking the road. And it's interesting, we've had a police car did turn up here briefly. It's gone away again. I'm never really sure how the police are going to respond to this. You can see it's actually on the other gates as well, fairly calm, and we've got security from the airport also ensuring that people who are trying to get past the traffic aren't doing something silly, as I think happened this morning in probably at the gate that we're looking at. So a big coach apparently actually went around somebody with wrapped in the orange plastic on the curb to get into the airport. So desperate to get there in time for their private flight. So let's go and see a bit. Finley made a great video for us, all about private flights and some really good statistics on aviation and what could be done to just find a way out of this mess and not be using flights so much in general, but especially private flights. Let's go to, I think it's part 2 or it might be part 3 of that video. I've lost track now.
Now, you may have heard people such as Bill Gates tell you that technology and innovation is the answer rather than reducing flying. Well, I'm an aerospace engineer. I used to work for Rolls-Royce, designing aircraft engines for the likes of Boeing and Airbus. And I can tell you that the conversations that we were having within the industry were very different to the misleading misinformation that was being shared with the public and with the media about what was possible with technology. For example, electric and hydrogen aircraft just can't compete with jet fuel powered aircraft in terms of range and payload, so the distance they can travel and the number of people they can carry. There's also a massive issue of timescales. Hydrogen aircraft will take at least 15 years to design, develop and certify before we even see one aircraft in service. And we're likely to have blown our carbon budget for 1.5 degrees C or even 2 degrees C by that point. Then you've got these so-called
sustainable aviation fuels.
So you've got things like biofuels, you've got electrofuels produced from electricity. But the reality is we have a very limited global resource of renewable energy and biomass, and we can't afford to waste that producing aviation fuel, which is very energy intensive to produce, and then burn it immediately in aircraft, rather than use it for more distributed uses, such as replacing fossil fuel fertilizer that's used in agriculture to grow food, ground transport, so cars and buses, and heating people's homes.
Okay, we'll have part 3 from Finley coming very soon. We just had a great shot actually of a jet coming overhead, right overhead, with a banner in the foreground and everything, and it didn't quite make it. But just to let you know, the private flights are continuing here for now, but our message today is private flights cost the earth, ban them, and it would be a hugely easy win. You really have to ask yourself why the government wouldn't ban private flights. Is it because they actually make use of them themselves, and people that they that they deal with and that they get donations from, perhaps, are actually benefiting from private flights. So they're trying to take care of their voter base. And we've got a. Sorry, I've been distracted because there is another flight just about to come over. So I'll try and get that in shot as I just talk about. Yes, so one thing I wanted to mention actually is Boris Johnson saying, talking about Kermit the Frog earlier this week, and also talking about we've had this sort of Wombles campaign that you've probably seen about, let's go one step greener in the coming up to COP26, which is the big UN climate talks in Glasgow, just a month away in November now. And we are seeing it's a code red for humanity. The IPCC report that came out maybe like 6 or 8 weeks ago now is saying that we are definitely going to reach 1.5 degrees of warming in the next 20 years. And by the end of the century, we're looking at up to 3 to 4 degrees of warming now. So that is just absolutely, it's terrifying. We've just had a whole rebellion, 2 weeks to register how frightened and angry we are that we've got to this point, and the government is still saying, let's take another step. Let's do some recycling. Wrong way around, God. Let's do some recycling, and let's look at those lovely vegetables that we can buy in a basket. We need to get real here. Things like private flights. These are just so much more important than just doing a little bit of recycling. We can't leave it up to the responsibility of individual households, who are struggling to get by. Something like this, banning private flights. If the government can't pull their finger out to do that, then I don't know how on earth you can say that it's easy to be green, because really, these easy wins that are in front of your eyes, that would be benefiting the majority of the world's population and nature in general. If you can't take that step, you can hardly call yourself a climate leader, and it doesn't bode well at all for COP26, those climate talks. Quite depressing, really. We've got another interview for you at another one of our gates. So let's go talk to one of our rebels there, talking about why they're here today.
Right, yes, it hasn't started to rain yet, and the rebels are keeping themselves warm. And I've got another rebel here who I'd like to have a word with. I know sometimes we when we ask if you'd have a word with us, you feel ill-prepared. You don't have all the statistics to your fingertips. Who would? I know for my part, most rebels are incredibly well informed and very passionate about what they do. So maybe you could just explain your motivation for being here today.
Yeah. Well, I suppose this looks quite sort of desperate, and it looks quite ridiculous. People might question why we do such a sort of crazy thing, but we find ourselves in a very desperate situation. We know that we're in code red for humanity, the IPCC report, and that means hundreds of governments and countries across the world are agreeing and are saying this is code red for humanity. We have the tiniest of windows to save ourselves from catastrophic climate change, catastrophic ecological damage. But since the Paris Agreement, since 2015, the UK government has done virtually nothing. They keep sort of approving, they're pondering a new coal mine, they keep approving new oil fields, licensing more fossil fuel extraction. And today we're at Farnborough Airport. This is the apex of the aviation industry. It represents a tiny elite of people that will continue to take short long haul flights for putting out masses of fuel of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So one statistic I heard was that the average flight carries 2.5 people, 2.5 passengers, and the average flight churns out the equivalent carbon dioxide of 9 UK citizens in a year, per year. This represents that very kind of elite. The government absolutely needs to be taxing aviation fuel, needs to be taxing aviation, so that this kind of thing becomes more difficult, because we are in a code red. We have to change. Individuals won't change. The government has to put in place policies, has to put in place taxation, so that this thing doesn't exist anymore. We have so few options, and this does seem desperate, it does seem ridiculous, but we are in ridiculous times, and we need to take really, really desperate measures.
It seems to, yes, indeed, and it seems that the government is going to have to have extraordinary courage to move forward on this. They put themselves in such an economic pickle. Unfortunately, the COVID hasn't helped, and the B word, which no one mentions, has put them in a state where anything that promotes growth is going to be allowed to go ahead, I presume, to just keep the economy taking over to the benefit of us all, supposedly, but not in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, if we'd started taking action, when we first knew about this, even if we started taking action 5 years ago, then we would be in a place where we could transition and things would be sort of sensible. But even now we're facing crises. We've got a fuel crisis on our hands, we've got a gas crisis on our hands, because we're not managing all of these impacts. We have just in time, so we get things to people just in time, but that's incredibly vulnerable to various crises that come across. The gas crisis is a result of us just not managing a transition to sustainable, renewable energy, which is so straightforward, such a no-brainer. It should be easy for us in this country, but we haven't done it. The government just seem locked into keeping fossil fuel industry happy, and that's very, very scary, and we should all be incredibly scared about that, because as you say, they're sort of they seem unable to take action. But that's why we do crazy things like this, because we want to draw attention to that and make people realise that we really do. It's down to people now. It's down to people power to stand up to it.
Yes, people power, definitely. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
No worries. Thank you.
We're going to move on to another location now, and I think we've got someone else with something to say.
Hello. Hello, yes, we've got 2 rebels here. They've been lying on the ground for about 2 hours. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself? And I know you've got something to say about Farnborough Airport in particular.
Hello, my name's Mike, a local here for many years. Yeah, we're sitting here outside Europe's premier private jet facility. Now, we know private jets are an environmental disaster. Aviation is the most carbon-intensive activity any human can engage in, and private jets are the most carbon-intensive form of aviation. Each aircraft landing here lands with just 2.5 passengers on average on board. And these passengers are pushing out up to 40 times as much carbon as anyone on a commercial flight. It's an environmental disgrace. Yet the people who own aircraft tend to regard themselves as leaders of society, as drivers of the economy, but they're also drivers of the climate crisis. So we're here today to ask them very clearly to take responsibility, to tell the truth, to tell us the damage private jets do to the environment, and then to do the only right thing, park them.
And now, would you like to pass it over to your compañero? I know you've got a concern about social justice.
Hi, so Lynn, I'm from the South Coast, just come up today. And to reflect what Mike has said, I think a good deal of my concern about the climate crisis as a whole is the different perceptions people have about our role here on the planet and its preservation. So it reflects to me something about the way that people's sense of entitlement, in the way that they view their own lives and the lives of others, that it's okay to do this. And I think the sort of the blindness to the broader global realities of what we're facing is thrown into stark relief by private flights. So I'm imagining that people who can afford to take these flights, and they're not paying for them. I mean, for the guys who get on these planes, everything's free, right? So they're not worried. They're not looking at their bank accounts going, oh, well, darling, we can't possibly fly to Davos because it's nearly the end of the month and we've got bills to pay. This is not how that thinking works. And I'm not dismissing them as individuals, but there's an imbalance in the way that we're consuming the planet's resources, which couldn't really be more starkly illustrated by the fact that guys are getting into limos from wherever they are without a thought for the cost or the consequences, flying to wherever they feel they need to be next. I'd be surprised, I don't want to judge, but I'd be surprised if any of what's happening at the other end of these flights is so important. I mean, they're not going to, it's not open heart surgery, I doubt, and they're not saving the world. It's probably just to be somewhere a bit warmer. And I don't think that's okay. And I'm not very warm at the moment. I'm a little bit inconvenient. The company is very good. I think the spirit is high. But essentially for any of our viewers, and I hope there are at least a couple out there, I just don't think it's okay. And I think to have somebody humbly lying in the road and saying, you know what, we know you're here and we know what's going on, and we're just asking you to think twice about what you're up to and what the consequences for all of us might be, including your own kith and kin, because these people have got kids, I assume. And just think again, mate, because it's not okay. And that's why I'm here.
Well, what is it like lying in the road in October? Cars going past, and the big coaches have been coming past.
Yeah, it's cold, uncomfortable, and it hasn't even started raining yet, which it will later on. So we'll see you in 10 hours' time, and it'll be really uncomfortable, I'm sure, at that stage. So yeah, it's no great fun lying here, but there's a real purpose behind it. We know there's been an abject failure to do anything about the problem that sits behind us here. Our elected representatives have done absolutely nothing to curb aviation emissions. The aircraft operators themselves are in denial. Farnborough here has actually got legal permission to increase the number of flights by a factor of 2.5. Now that's in the middle of a climate crisis. The IPCC has made it very clear that we've got 8 years left to cut our emissions by 45%. Emissions here are simply rising, and that's just not good enough at this moment of crisis.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, you two? Any concerns? Or?
I would imagine that anybody who's watching this is probably already on board with the cause and what we're doing in Extinction Rebellion, or a far broader movement of peoples across the world trying to save us and get us out of this mess. But I would say there's no cost to this. I'm lying in the road. I'm a bit chilly. It's a bit uncomfortable. The company is good, but it's nothing compared with what's coming. This is fine, mate. This is absolutely fine. It's a bit chilly. At some point, somebody's going to bring me a coffee. The police have decided not to bother with us just at the moment. That may change. It may rain. But at some point in the next 48 hours, I'll be warm and dry. I'll have a new war story to tell. And in comparison with what we need to be doing to make this change, this is trivial. And if you don't know that already, get yourself a piece of direct action, get involved, and let's turn this thing around. Because this really, it's possible to be happy and do this, because we're on the right side of history.
I should do that. I'll just finish up here. The thing to remember about these two heroes are, they're not doing it for a pay rise or better conditions for themselves. They're doing it for everyone. So thank you very much and well done. And now we're going to pass on to someone else, but I didn't quite hear who it was. So I'll be just as interested to find out as everyone else. You're still on. Right, we're passing up.
Yeah, big up to the guys on the gate that we just talked to, because they're so right. We're doing this for everybody, and it's a minor inconvenience compared to what's to come. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out and just reminding us all of that, because it is quite cold and miserable here today, and it's taken, it takes a lot out of you doing these things. But like I said, the company is great. We're in the company of so many people who are just, this movement's about love. It's not about trying to divide people. It's about trying to bring people together onto our cause. So with that in mind, I suppose, and we're just going to show one final plane coming over. It's just kind of final wrap up, really. This action will go on through the day. But the live stream, the live stream needs to finish. And you know what? So do private flights. Stop private flights now. Private flights cost the earth. They could be done away with very easily, and it would go a long way to helping us solve some of our climate problems, and also climate inequity, which is, it's not showing the way with true leadership, and it's not the way that we want to go if we want to have a fair world coming through the climate crisis, as we see more than 1.5 degrees of warming within the next 20 years. So yes, thank you to everybody who's joined today. Thanks to everybody who's been watching the live stream. As ever, please do share it. We're cross-posting on XR UK and Southeast region, but if you live in a different region or somewhere else in the world and you want to spread the message, yes, please do. We'd love more people to become aware of this issue, and maybe this will inspire you to take action against local airports that have private flights in your area, because there are more of them around than you might think, and we'd love to hear more about continue this story and this narrative around the world as well. So yes, that's basically it here from Farnborough Airport on the Surrey-Hampshire border. We're continuing to block 3 gates, and the airport is still open, but it's not open to vehicles. So this is our small symbolic protest. The airport will be functioning again tomorrow, but we hope it won't be forever, and we hope this sends a message to people about the future that we want to see. So Todd, I don't know if you want to say just bye to our viewers, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for tuning in, and just to say, thank you to everyone that has actually made this happen today. I read about a month and a half ago that this action was foiled by the police, and there's so many people that have to come together to make this work, and without all these brave rebels and these people down here that are locked on, this wouldn't be possible. So please do like and share this message and get it out as much as you can. It's very important that we highlight these injustices and do all that we can in this critical moment for humanity.
Great note to finish on, I think. Thanks for joining us too, Todd. Everybody have a good day, and see you on the streets. Rebel for life.
Okay, so technology won't save us. What should the government do? Well, the key thing to understand when it comes to policies is that aviation fuel is currently tax-free. Meanwhile, petrol and diesel at the fuel pump is currently taxed at greater than 50%, versus that 0% tax for aviation fuel. This means if you're unemployed, or if you're a minimum wage worker and you're driving to work, you're driving to the shops, you're picking your kids up from school, you're paying a very high rate of tax on your fuel. Meanwhile, frequent flyers and the millionaires or billionaires that are flying around in private jets are doing so tax-free. Meanwhile, though, they're doing more environmental destruction in one day than you're doing in an entire year. Then there's carbon offsetting, and I think, well, at least I hope by this point, most people understand that carbon offset schemes are at best ineffective and at worst actively dangerous. But you might have heard people talking about something called negative emissions, such as
direct air capture.
These sorts of things propose that we'll suck carbon out of the air and store it back underground. However, this technology is yet to be demonstrated at any significant scale. There's also huge associated risks around the immense quantity of energy, land, water, etc. that they use. They may actually exacerbate climate change. And then there's the point about who's actually going to pay for this, because under current policies, most aviation emissions are not priced. So it's going to be future taxpayers that are paying for negative emissions. Basically, our children. This represents a huge intergenerational injustice. And already, the UK government has awarded millions to fossil fuel companies like Shell for pilot projects for these schemes. So my takeaway message is that we need far stronger policies to reduce frequent flying and to curtail the use of private jets. We also need to make sure that polluter pays. That is, high income, high emitting frequent flyers should pay for the costs of aviation emissions that are Okay, so to reduce frequent flying and to curtail the use of private jets. We also need to make sure that polluter pays. That is, high income, high emitting frequent flyers should pay for the costs of aviation emissions that are currently burdened on the rest of society. Now, this is exactly what the UK Citizens' Assembly on Climate Change recommended to the UK government. So they should listen to them.